Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of your weekly NXT 2.0 Body Slam Post Show. As always, this wonderful face is the Jameus, and I'm joined by my dude, Throwback, Patrick. How you doing tonight, man?
To quote a line from a show, "What's good? What's good? What's good?" This show is a progression that's getting better. We talked last week that it would be a good show and then tanked. Not the case this time, which is pleasantly surprised. So I can't wait to see what's coming next. The way things set up and start up, it's going to be awesome, and I can't wait for Worlds Collide. It's weird to say as an NXT fan because when they had Worlds Collide on the network, I just passed by it. Because they're building this up as a really important show compared to like it was on the network, I'm really, really excited for Worlds Collide because it will make it a lot more fun to watch. It's a little different in the way they're setting things up. Give WWE props for this. They're doing it right for a change with NXT.
It's a matter of how important you make NXT UK feel, because I'm the biggest NXT UK fan in the world. Nobody who watches this podcast regularly should be surprised by that revelation. But the issue is, why is anybody going to care when Walter's on an island? When all of these guys are on an island and the one time they show up, Walter gets Claymored and loses in 3 seconds. Like, they never made NXT UK feel important, or that it was on par, so nobody really had much of a reason to watch.
I like how they made Bates important too, because they mentioned when he was out there, when they were asking him about stuff about he is the first and last NXT UK champion, which it made it feel more important before Worlds Collide because you're connecting the dots before they go into the NXT Europe, which I won't be shocked if they crown Bates as the NXT Europe champion if they don't give him the NXT title.
They made the champions feel really important. Like on Mako's entrance, which we'll get more in depth on later, Vic Joseph really put her over and made her feel like a massive deal. And she is a massive deal.
Yeah,
Mako
she's a legend.
Samoa is one of the probably the biggest name in Joshi wrestling since Manami Toyota. And the fact that she's been in WWE but not in WWE, again on Island, you haven't really introduced her to the main audience, and you have to build her up to be as big of a deal as she is.
And it made it big of a deal too because they pointed out that it's been 5 years since she's been on US Soul competing. So that's a huge deal in its right.
I think the triple threat match is interesting, which we'll get more to in the future. But they made it feel like an attraction to see Mako Satomura in the United States. And that's what you're supposed to do. I'm not quite sure when her last match in the United States was. I'm going to browse Cage Match for that real quick. I know she was doing the UK tour for years until the NXT UK picked her up, which is why she's on NXT UK in the first place.
I'm going to say this much. With all these people transplanting from the UK side, I will not be shocked if Jenny actually pops up after Worlds Collide on NXT.
I wouldn't either, and I think we should probably go into that real quick. Her last... I'm in 2017 now. Her last US match was... Let's see here. Was probably with Shakara in Pennsylvania when the Sendai girls did that run in Shakara for that brief little bit. So with NXT Europe, and I said if anybody watches my other podcasts, last night on TWM Talks Indies, I spoke a lot about the UK brand and the people reintegrating into the European scene. So I'm not going to go in depth on that. If you want my thoughts on that, where the scope of the independence is going to be in 2 years, watch that show from last night, but that's not necessarily relevant to this. I just wanted to plug it. So if you look at the list of people released, they've cut a lot of really strong female talent. Nina Samuels, really strong female talent, one of the best character-driven females in wrestling. Amelia McKenzie, somebody they clearly had big plans for. From what I've heard, a lot of the cuts were people who didn't necessarily want to move to the States yet, and they'll be brought back at a later time. The people who weren't cut, Isla Dawn, Jenny. There were a couple of others, B. Priestley, Miko Samura, both of whom were on the program tonight. So I wonder, they didn't cut them, which means they're probably going to integrate them into main NXT for the next little bit because they didn't want people sitting at home. Just
pretty much.
So I do think Jenny's on the way. I think Isla Dawn's on the way. And I noticed an open spot for them tonight because they've been kind of allied on NXT UK. Lacey Lane and Casey Canzaro, I can't think of their new ring name.
Katana and Casey. They kept Casey Carter.
So
Kaden Carter or whatever.
Kaden Carter and Katana Chance issued an open challenge to anybody, and they was heavily hinted it was going to be UK folks. So that's probably going to be where Jenny and Isla Dawn come in for Worlds Collide to challenge for the NXT UK Women's Championship. I think that makes total sense. I think that's a spot you get them on the show, fill out the card a little more, get all the champions on the card.
I like how you call the women's tag titles in NXT the women's title. I honestly think that if at Worlds Collide, they'll bring them in, but I think Kaden and Catanzaro, I don't really care. Carter and Catanzaro, I don't really care for their stage names or whatnot on that.
They've not done enough to get me invested into anything they've done.
I think that whoever
is a really good worker.
I think whoever wins the tag title tournament on the main roster, you're going to end up seeing them going against somebody in NXT and unifying those titles, because with NXT Europe, if they do the same thing, they want to have a global kind of aspect of it. But I don't think the NXT Europe women's tag titles will be a part of it. I talk about mainland US kind of style.
NXT Europe didn't have women's tag titles.
No, but they did slip on SmackDown, because I watched SmackDown this past week about McAfee saying that.
Right?
Huh?
First time for everything, right?
Yeah, they let it slip that those titles that people are in the tournament are basically defended on all brands, McAfee said. And that's not the case now, considering supposedly NXT is not Redcon anymore. So there you go. Wow, shocking, NXT Redcon. But who would have thought that, right?
So I think with NXT Europe, and the show I just mentioned before, go watch that. I talked a lot about how Triple H's plan for 2016 is probably reenacted and how that's going to impact the business as a whole going forward. But NXT Europe's only the first step. We know Triple H has been clamoring to make NXT India, which is why we got that really weird Jeet Rama AJ Styles match at the beginning of this year. But we know he's wanted NXT India. He wants to
get into the Japan market too.
He wants to implement NXT into every.
He wants a little bit of everything.
And of course, NXT Japan, I think, is probably next. The Meiko Satomura, Kairi Sane, Kairi Hojo. Which, shout out to Kairi Hojo. We hope you get better. Probably not watching this, but if you are, hope the bout with COVID's going as well as it can. Io Shirai.
You got Asuka.
Asuka. They've brought in an ample amount of Japanese talent. So Triple H is heavy into the Japanese style of professional wrestling, and that seems to be right up his alley. I think that's probably the next logical step, especially since there's a lot more ground to cover in a market such as India versus Japan. You have a strong foot in the Japanese market. There's a lot of really strong wrestling in the Japanese market. realistically, the Japanese market is starting to get oversaturated with the amount of Joshi promotions that are killing it right now. On top, and then you have New Japan, you have Noah, which Noah's doing really good work. I'm actually surprised Triple H hasn't reached out to Timothy Thatcher, who's the only reason that's on my mind is because he's a current tag champion for them, PHC tag champion at Noah, to bring him back. But I think that's the next logical market step. And I also think that's part of the reason B. Priestley was put into this match. I think B. Priestley wins both belts at Worlds Collide. And I say that because you can't, if you want to keep NXT Europe established, they have to win one of the at least two head matches. And I can't really see them taking the belt off Breaker without more of a story. And like you've said previously, I think that's Carmelo Hayes when the time comes in Boston. But and then
he acknowledged that it would happen in Boston. Holy crap! Sound the alarm. What is this? Freaking Patriot Nation in freaking Tampa?
Hey, I'm a Tom Brady fan.
I'm a defensive kind of guy when it comes to football. So
you're just upset.
Brady as a quarterback is great, but Brady as a person, that's a different question.
Brady's fine. Brady's funny, but the NXT Tag Championship looks to be. I was surprised. They fully set up Creeds versus Gallus last week, so I was fully expecting Gallus to win the UK belts back. So you have UK representing the UK belts.
Yeah,
you go head to head with Diamond Mine. It looks like they announced Diamond Mine versus Gallus next week.
Yeah.
So they just do the rematch for Briggs and Jensen against Gallus. I don't know if I like that, but you could always have Gallus win that match. But it still would be the UK.
I think the Creeds are going to be the ones winning the UK titles, and I think the fact that they'll be the ones running with both brands titles, it would make sense considering how high they are on the Creeds.
I don't think the final champion should be two. I don't think the match to determine the final champions should be 4 Americans for the UK championship.
I think you're going to put what's going to happen is either Pretty Deadly or Gallus is going to be thrown in as a triple threat or a fatal 4-way.
Pretty Deadly. I think they should have gotten a lot longer of a run with the NXT championships, so I wouldn't mind putting them back in the picture. But I do think B. Priestley wins. You have to have at least one of the Europe representatives win to keep the brand established. And we've been talking for months. Where does Mandy Rose go from here? She has nobody left to work with in main NXT, so you can have her lose the belt, keep her heat, move up, and then you'd still unify the belts with getting the belt off Mandy and Mandy not taking the pin. They're clearly high on Blair Davenport, which of course, Blair Davenport's been one of the best, most renowned women's wrestlers in the world for the better part of 5 years now. It's just a matter of once they got her to move to the States was when they were going to push her to the moon. I thought the promo tonight was really well done. I like the reasoning for Blair Davenport being in this match, seeing as she is the number 1 contender for the UK Women's Championship, and she's never going to get that match because the championship isn't going to be there anymore. So it's a natural segue to put her into the match. She has a rightful claim to the opportunity to be in the match. And from there, Mako coming out, they made her feel like a big deal. And I thought the promo Blair cut was really well done. But let's get into the match card a little bit. The show opened with a match between Gallus and Brooks and Briggs. Ooh. He cut out on me. So let's see here. We don't have a regular NXT overlay. Okay, so the show opened with a match between Jensen and Briggs versus Gallus. Really fun little match. Gallus still has the best team in wrestling. The match was interrupted when Lash Legend started brawling with Paxton Henley. Pretty Deadly runs in, brawls with Jensen and Briggs. Referee calls the match. Gallus wins by count out. So they obviously set up a rematch down the road. Gallus doesn't get the championships despite winning the match, obviously. From there, Andre Chase brought in an NXT UK recruit that for his university from when he was down there last on excursion. Charlie Dempsey, the son of William Regal. Charlie Dempsey taught the class a lot of different things. Really well done segment. I'm excited to see Charlie Dempsey in NXT UK or main NXT. Really solid worker. Of course, he's William Regal's kid. He's not going to be a bad worker by any means. So that's interesting. I'm curious as to where they go from there. You don't need to do much with them right now out of the gate. From there, we get back to a segment with Grayson Waller, who debuted his new talk show night, the Grayson Waller Effect, which is interesting because he flat out said, "This is a show about me, and I bring guests on." No, I don't want that shit. Where's the? Which is different. I've not really seen that. Usually they talk about the guests, the heels, find a heel way to talk over them without being honest about it. So that's interesting. This was a fun segment. I like that he gathered questions from Instagram Live, made it feel more authentic, made it feel like participation. Use the tools that social media provides for you to help produce a better show. Him asking about Apollo Crews' accent was hilarious. I like that they addressed that it just kind of went away. I like that they addressed why Apollo Crews is on Tuesday nights instead of Monday nights. They never really explained that the first go around. So I'm glad that Triple H is trying to fill in those gaps story-wise. We get back from the break, and we have a match between Cameron Grimes and Javier Bernal, who is making his re-debut on 2.0. The Schisms, Joe Gacy, and Rip Fowler and Jagger Reed appear on the platform above the crowd. He's not happy with their presence, and that yada, yada, yada. Bernal doesn't win the match, but you can see where they're going with Grimes. That came up later during the Schisms match when Grimes was euphoric, and obviously they're setting something up long-term with him in the group. After that match, Blair Davenport defeated Indy Hartwell in a really fun match. After the match, Davenport hit her with a V-trigger. I really liked the amount they got out of this match. The collar elbow tie-up at the beginning. I'm a sucker for a really good collar elbow tie-up. Make it mean something. Put all your effort into it. It can take a match from being a solid match to a really good match. Too many guys nowadays go through the motions with that, and it doesn't work like it should. That's something to a feeling out process is really big, a really big deal for the psychology. So Indy loses the match. After the match, we've already covered the post-match promo. We have another post-match promo with Indy Hartwell. I've talked for weeks about how Indy Hartwell's character is directionless since Dexter Lumis had his unceremonious release. With his return, I was huge on the Index story, but I like that she finally has that direction back. They revisit it instead of just retconning it altogether. So that's good. And then some tie-in with this week's Raw. Again, we've spoken a lot how NXT is kind of on an island. Dexter Lumis, after last night's issues, got arrested, so they went but revisited, made it feel important on main NXT.
I lost internet. Sorry about that.
I noticed. I just breezed through everything real quick. I breezed through the indie match. I breezed through all of the matches up to that point. Really struggled because I was getting used to the dynamic, and then I was just like, oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, no, I lost internet. I was just like,
You're a big fan of Index. Hit me with your thoughts on that segment because I know that's something.
is now on main roster. Perfect sense.
With Johnny Gargano coming back and feuding with Austin Theory, the way obviously is very integral to the show going forward. Dexter, this is the way to move Indy back. I think it gives. What have I been talking about with Indy Hartwell for months, Patrick?
She's stale.
Not that she has no direction.
Pretty much, yeah.
This gave her direction back, and I like that. Even if I wasn't the biggest fan of the storyline the first go around.
It's interesting because like I really think this sets multiple angles on this. I think this is them saying we need her as a mouthpiece for Dexter. So I think with the way he ended up, it says, "I love you. This is not goodbye, but I love you." If you notice the note real closely, so this is them saying we're gonna have Indy go up and be Dexter's mouthpiece,
which she needs a mouthpiece. That's not a character that it's a completely different character. So I hate making this comparison.
I liked how smooth this whole thing was, though.
It's similar to early '90s Undertaker, where the less he talks, the more menacing he is.
I like how smooth this was. Like at the end, all of a sudden she's sitting there all upset, and then he just pops up like a meerkat. The whole freaking crowd goes crazy, and then they go out to the back, and they're just like all lovey-dovey, and he goes and gives her the note, and that's why I noticed this is not goodbye. I'll see you soon, or kind of something like that. And then he steps out, opens the doors, and you can see the lights, and then he just gets in the position that they had. I think he is going to debut majorly soon. They set up multiple feuds, but I think Indy going up with him is the perfect fit because at least with Indy, they could make it seem like they understand. She understands what he's saying and stuff like that.
From there, I'm sorry.
Indy will be his Scarlet to Karrion Kross.
He's got a lot better character mannerisms than Karrion Kross does. But from there, we have the Dyad versus Joaquin Wilde and Raul Mendoza. I really like this match. I really like the story of this match. The idea of Tony D'Angelo trying to change what works is really funny because he hates luchadors and lucha wrestling. I thought that was really entertaining. I thought it added an interesting dynamic to the match. I also threw them off their game a little bit so that the Grizzled Young Vets pick up the win. And I like that, okay, we can't have Legado on NXT anymore. Then we're just leaving NXT. I like that. I don't have any fear about Santos Escobar going to the main roster with Triple H, considering he was at the WrestleMania press conference, the only NXT rep. And Triple H is looking for somebody with Santos's makeup. And Santos is a really good all-around performer, but Raul Mendoza and Joaquin Wilde would have struggled without him. And I
can't wait to see them either on Raw or SmackDown.
And they can only add to his character, so I don't mind that. What were your thoughts on that?
I can't wait for them to be on main roster and see how fun this is going to be. If anything, if the Judgment Day have Dominic on the other side, right? Can you picture El Gato del Fantasma against the Judgment Day? Can you just picture so many things? You could have the Bloodline go against El Gato del Fantasma. Not good.
Just put, yeah, I guess.
No, but I mean, can you see like so many things? You know, you have a great group right there. Either Raw or SmackDown, instantaneously people are going to think about it, pay attention to them.
The group is a character group that's never really been treaded before on main roster territory.
No, but
you can tell different stories with it. Imagine Roman Reigns is pretty much the closest thing WWE's ever had to a Vito Corleone, other than Santos Escobar, who's actually closer to a mob boss.
I'm just excited for the ideas that they can do. I won't be shocked if they hold them off until like Survivor Series.
I probably would too. I don't know where you'd fit them in right now with everything going on in the main roster. And Triple H would much rather not rush something just to get it on TV if he doesn't
Yeah,
have
he
a
let
plan.
it cook,
Which,
and you could play it off like D'Angelo is looking for them and doesn't know where they are, and he's just like screw it, and then there you go, you have him find another person.
yeah, from there, Cal Bloom wrestled Tyler Bate.
Let's begin. Von Wagner, the most hated
That
man
name is
supposedly.
not good.
I know. I'm just gonna say Von Wagner, the most hated person in NXT, according to a lot of people. They don't like him and Grayson Waller. So I mean, I want to say this: you put Waller and Wagner together, that's a good team right there. Because half the
That's a
people in
heat
the world
magnet.
don't like them.
And with Grayson Waller being a slimy weasel, hiding behind
Yeah,
Von Wagner, you could get a lot of mileage out of. And
you
then
get a freaking a
Grayson Waller
yard
to
out of it.
talk for Von Wagner too. That's actually a solid pairing.
So I mean, it's going to be. It was an amazing match. It was great.
Hmm.
It made Bates a lot more stronger to me, in my opinion, because of the fact that it made people who don't pay attention to the UK brand get more eyes on him and more interest. Besides his promo work with Breaker earlier in the night, it put more eyes in his ability inside than anything. Um, I'm excited. I really am. I thought they should unify some of these titles a while back, and look what they're doing now. I'm running around like grabbing my son and doing laps right around now. But I can't wait. It's something different, and Wagner put up a good fight, but they're gonna end up giving Bates more momentum because of him winning the UK tournament, and now you have to give him a US audience that believes how relevant that title can be. Even like you say, he's on an island. He's kind of what they refer in football Revis's island, supposedly. Um, and it has to give a casual fan who pays attention to NXT, who doesn't know about the UK brand, you know, ideas on who he is, how good he is, and how his strength is. So you're putting over another brand's champion, and Wagner, aka Cal Bloom, is sadly has to take that bullet for the night.
So I'm gonna let you handle the main event because you know my thoughts on Wendy Chu's character. Actually, I did laugh at the lights out being actual lights out, considering Wendy Chu's character. I thought that was a nice touch. And
I
I go out of my way to not put that character over.
I think it was funny. I mean, just like we had lights out during this show for a little bit for me having no internet. Um, it it was awesome to see what they could do with this type of match. They definitely specified and made this for her, which is great because the fight pit was specifically made for Thatcher. So they do these things from time to time. So if they pull a lights out match down the line, if she
It's
gets
like
called up,
how the Lions Den was Ken Shamrock's match back in the
yeah,
day.
if they call her up eventually down the line, they can make this an all-purpose brand match because of the fact that you could use that anyways. I did love the throwback, pardon the pun, to of the Legos because it reminded me of Mick Foley doing thumbtacks at Hell in a Cell, the matches the match he had with Triple H at MSG, stuff like that. It was like an old, tipping the cap and all that stuff to Mick, but Legos. And then instead of using a table, you used a bed box spring in order to do it. Baby powder was in this match. It had a little of everything. The only gripe about this match I have is Tiffany Stratton doing that slam right on the Legos because the scoop slam, because of the fact that it seemed like she wasn't fluid. She was just hesitant a little bit because she wasn't sure about it. Other than that, it was really interesting, really good. It went back and forth, and the crowd was hot for it. Even though they played it off like they couldn't see shit, they could. But it's just, I I think it's interesting, and now you just got to see where it goes. Plus, we forgot to mention the whole Alba Fire thing. They're setting up to make the NXT Women's Division a lot more difficult for whoever comes out with the unified titles.
Which is good because that division's had no depth for a little bit.
Well, I mean, the main roster is now completely stacked. Like, no matter where they go with
The
it,
main
and then
has great hands, but they're not established. A lot of them.
don't be surprised. Like, I know this is a long shot because has to take care of the kid, but I won't be shocked if Candice is there. Then they do what Seth and Becky do back and forth. When they travel a little bit with their kid. I mean, if Seth and Becky could work, they'll look at it like, hey, we these guys, Candice and Johnny could do it. It'd be interesting because you would have Candice walking around with Johnny, and you could have Candice wrestle periodically on Raw periodically. And then maybe, I don't know, down the line's pulling away. But I'm more excited to see a DIY thing with Ciampa on SmackDown. I mean, on the Raw side, but that might change with the draft looming over there. That's the other thing. The draft is coming down the line, down the pike too.
Reports today said that was put off actually from Fightful Select.
I still think it, even though it's put off, I still think there'll be a draft down the line.
Oh, there's going to be another draft eventually. But I think we covered everything for this week's show. How have you been, Patrick?
I've been basically a good amount of sleep here and there. Trying to keep busy. I finally got approved for my FMLA, which is great.
Nice.
I made it a big deal. Brody caught a Pokemon. Just trying to keep as busy as we can. I mean, trying to get the house ready for people to come and hang out and see us and stuff. I saw my dad today, and he pulled out some old school pictures of my mom, pictures I've never seen of my mom.
I saw my dad too.
So, I mean, I've never, like, these are pictures that when she passed, we had the boards. They weren't on the board. I've never seen these before. And I was just like completely in shock. Wrestling wise, I've got people asking me when I'm going to my next show. I don't know. I want to go to Survivor Series, but with the way things are going right now, that's not going to happen.
My next show is an NXT show coming up.
Hell, I wish I could go to the Survivor Series and just enjoy it, but I can't. There's no way in chance in hell of that happening.
Yeah.
Money-wise, there's no chance. I have a feeling if I look at the tickets, because they go on sale, Friday? They literally are like running up to like $200 to $300 just for nosebleeds. Oof. So I'm like, I'd rather go to an ROH show anyways, just because, not because of the cost, because of the quality is there, and plus the way they do things, it didn't affect me as much. Other than that, it's just been very quiet for the most part.
Yeah, the lights might bother you a little bit,
Well, it also depends on like how far I'm from it. Like, we were on the floor for the ROH show, so that was a little different with the flames and stuff like that, and some of the lighting. It didn't affect it anything. It's just, with WWE, they use a lot more like flashing AEW stuff like that.
And that can trigger certain things medically that you don't want.
But that's why, like, I would carry some medication with me. When they ask you if I have any meds on me, I'd be like, yeah, I have epilepsy meds. They can't do anything about it. Other than that, we're just trying to keep it day at a time. Try to enjoy everything. He's getting bigger and bigger. And
he's just gonna keep
going. A month old.
And enjoy this phase of his life while you can.
Yeah, he's a month old now, so it's awesome. As much as it is, I mean, for me, I was being lackadaisy, except for like doing with the NXT, but like main roster stuff, I was just like, SmackDown's okay and stuff, and Raw was horrible. I just completely stopped it, and I think the last 2 Mondays are the first 2 Mondays I've watched Raw in about almost a year. That's how bad I didn't like it. And then just all this injection and stuff like that. I said this on Twitter too. I want DIY versus the Usos. Just give me that. Give me that at Survivor Series. Have it make sense. They've run through the same tag teams over and over and over again.
The match they're setting up right now is Sammy and Kevin versus the Usos.
I know that, but still, it's the same formula they're going to do. They're going to feed two singles guys to go against that. Ciampa and Gargano are singles guys. Yes, it's the same thing me stating that, but they've tagged more times. And Johnny in his promo initiated, I haven't been here in 9 months. Not a lot of people know who I am, but if you're looking at NXT, I am Mr. NXT. And literally stated that he is he's a multiple NXT champion, multiple North American championship. He put that title over for NXT, which is big props to Johnny, because you don't hear people when Vince was around putting over main roster, putting over NXT titles on, like the North American title on it.
I do a weekly NXT show. I should know this. Who the hell is the NXT North American champion right now?
Carmelo Hayes.
Oh yeah, he wasn't on this week. That's why I didn't remember. He's having a good reign too. I really should have known that. Wow, he's my favorite guy at NXT right now. I'm ready for that reign to end though, because it's gone on too long, and it's time for him to move on to bigger things.
And the thing is that
I'd have him drop it to Nathan Frazier at Worlds Collide, since he's one of the guys that came over recently from the UK division.
I think that if you have Hunter running it and it's his baby, they're going to acknowledge certain things in NXT now that Vince didn't want that. So when like Charlotte comes back, they're not going to say she's the 14-time champion. I don't know how many times she's won. She's the 15-time women's champion because she won
twice.
Yes. And they did, and on Raw, they were retconning that NXT title. She's won it twice compared to how many times she's won both of the Raw and SmackDown
she's
titles.
14 time because she's won both of the other two brands 6 times.
Yeah.
Not a single one of those reigns, other than the first one, was memorable.
But I'm just saying, like, now they're showing that they're not retconning anything. Like, they said that about Kerry, and he's a former NXT champion. They're now saying, hey, and this is why I argue about NXT. I'm passionate about this brand because I love the black and gold era and I care about the 2.0 era. I honestly believe that if they're not retconning anything and it's they look at it as like an established, it's an own entity, not entity and development entity, right?
Right.
Why not just say, hey, NXT is not a developmental brand. It's a brand just like Raw and SmackDown where they're bringing people up and building them up instead of doing that. Like, it's a stepping stone to each to get to a point. That's the way it was in the black and gold brand. And people don't acknowledge that. They're like, oh, it's developmental. No, it's not. NXT black and gold, even though they were developing talent to go onto the main roster to get people into it to feed the machine, they were still considered their own entity of brand, and they were considered
be a brand and be developmental. I think at some point they focused on one side of the coin a lot more than the other, but they were still using the brand to specifically develop talent.
And they were doing that back in the 80s. They were doing that in the 90s. Like, they would bring somebody up, a no-name, and develop them and get them better before they would put them in FCW and OVW and stuff. And they would build them up on there and put them on Raw, on Monday Night Raw to see if they could sink or swim, or they would put them on Superstars back in the day. Yes, I'm that old. I remember Superstars and, Sunday Night Heat. I remember the first Sunday Night Heat. I remember the first Saturday Night Heat was literally at Penn Station. I watched that. I remember all that stuff.
Shotgun Saturday Night was Penn Station.
Well, you know what I mean, though. Still, I remember all these things. It's just...
Dude, there's a really good Shotgun Saturday Night match with Mankind against Bret Hart, and it's one of the weirdest matches I've ever seen.
The tombstone on the escalator, and then like Hunter just escalated downward afterwards. I literally like they're doing what it used to be like 80s and 90s for developing talent for the most part, but they have a better facility to do it now. That's my gripe, and that's what I've been trying to point out about the undisputed title. And people are like, oh, it's NXT, it's developmental. They see it, they look at it its own brand. Even though they're developing talent to give to Raw and SmackDown, they're still developing talent to make it better. And that's why you're seeing Johnny on the main roster, Ciampa on the main roster. You're seeing a lot of people coming up now that were development, you would say developmental, but they were part of the NXT brand. They say it, they don't call it developmental. Has anybody on any podcast, literally, and this is my huge gripe about this, on any podcast, I don't even say it on mine, could say on what you say this and say they heard this from main roster WWE on air. They don't say NXT development isn't a developmental. They don't even word it like that. They say this is like, Johnny, I'm a former NXT champion.
They're not going to bury the guy as he comes up. They're not going to bury the brand. It's all in how they historically treat the brand in comparison.
And now with everything going on, and they're having the hints way the black and gold was treated. Black and gold was treated like a big thing. It was treated like a big deal, but it wasn't treated by Vince that way. That's what it made it a little bit unique in its own. That Hunter made it feel like it was the people's brand, kind of. And now with him in control, to me, it feels like he's going back to that, but all of everything. He's putting the right dominoes in the right spots to contribute to where it needs to be. I really do believe, as much as Chemical Julian, shout out to him, the Roundtable podcast, him and Shane and stuff, and BJ. I truly believe, and people can, and I will die on this opinion hill on this, that one day there will be somebody that goes to the main roster, pulls a Kevin Owens like they did with John Cena, and say, you are not the undisputed champion. Our brand is considered one of the best brands out in the world because of the talent we have. I have a legitimate gripe about this. I deserve a shot. If you are this company, because quote unquote to Roman, he is the one that carries that company. NXT is part of one of their brands. He has not. There's nobody that other than AJ, other than Natalia, other than Dolph, but I'm going to say the bigger name out of all of them that came down, even if it was a one-off match, was AJ. Literally, whoever is holding that NXT
is literally the biggest name to go down to NXT.
The thing about it is you have Bayley, Sasha, stuff like that. But in the 2.0 era, AJ is the biggest name that they have there, like big and very oh my god kind of thing. And if AJ is going there, that gives you a solid grip that this is what it is. I think if you give 2.0 a year from now, we're going to be talking about a renaissance of NXT, and that 2.0 and black and gold might be possibly on the same level. We're recording this. This is why it's going to be important. The other thing is that with the undisputed title, if you have somebody of the skill, not on the same level as Roman, but respected in the company as close to Roman, maybe not that close, but close enough to where you're going to be like, oh, even if Roman doesn't have the title, and let's say Theory has it or something like that, because that's the way they're seeming like they're going to split the title, so that way Survivor Series makes sense. But it literally is one of those things where it's like you can have Theory, the WWE champion, or let's say he does that route, or the Universal Champion, go down to NXT to rub it all in everybody's faces, because like he's doing with Gargano, and try to make the NXT title make sense, and then figure something out. But in about a year's time, Survivor Series next year, we will see all three brands in that kind of brand warfare, because I think this time next year we'll be talking about something major happening in NXT 2.0.
And there you have Throwback's pontification for this week. We're gonna wrap this up. Where can the good folks find you, Patrick?
Right here with the freaking coolest dude over here. Yeah, we do this every Tuesday night, basically rocking out the NXT 2.0 post show for bodyslam.net. Go comment, like, and subscribe to this video. Also support everybody on Body Slam. Do a slam chat, and support everything else. Also,
good thing you plug Slam Chats because I always forget.
Also, subscribe to this channel, because once we're getting closer and closer to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and then keep doing everything on the Twitch stuff. Roundtable podcast. You've got, wrestling views. You got with Cass and Tom, and you have. Yeah, you have
I've been on a few episodes in recent weeks, so if you want to go into the archives, check those out. I was on the Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat episode and the Triple H Shawn Michaels episode. 4 of my favorite workers of all time.
You have the Ring of
Blast.
You have the Ring of Honor podcast we do. You have, so many great people. You have great people that write for the site. Like, Jameis is a great editor. You have Cass. You have so many great people.
Okay.
I mean, and then Thursday nights, Wicked Crazy Pinfalls. We had a show last week that wasn't wrestling at all. We talked about cars. Yes, a wrestling web thing on YouTube that talks about cars. Was that Drew? Yeah. And just talk about our favorite cars, maintenance, and stuff like that. This week, I don't know. Let's see what happens. But it's been we do it every Thursday night. We might shift it periodically in time. I mean, I'm thinking about changing the date again, just because, well, why not? I mean, Tuesday nights we're watching NXT. Why not go from Wicked Crazy Pinfall, possibly on a Tuesday night while NXT is going on, and go straight over here? I mean, it would make fun. Other than that, we basically youtube.com/throwback27. Also, Twitter right there is throwback978, and also the same handle on the Twitch, twitch.tv throwback978. Other than that, we're just rocking it out, having fun. If you want to check also past stuff on Anchor, just look up for Wicked Crazy Pinfalls in there and just spread the word. With anything everybody puts out a good word on, everything is really appreciated. I can't wait. Future's bright. We're still getting no momentum. We're still trying to get somebody against our champion. Shout out to the Wicked Crazy Pinfalls undisputed champion, Drew Nicholas. We got to get him to somebody squared up, because we have a shit ton of shows coming up as wrestling fans. I love wrestling. This is freaking NXT. This is our NXT, and we're going to take this all the way down.
And of course, you can find this lovely face on Twitter at the Jameis. I'm editor at Body Slam. I produce some of our podcasts, including the aforementioned Ring of Honor podcast. And of course, all of our news writers, Corey, Brady, Rami, all do tremendous work. It really makes my job easy, which is what I like. Be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I have a lot of projects outside of Body Slam coming up, and projects for Body Slam. So all of my stuff will be on my Twitter at the Jameis. Take it away, Patrick. What do you end off with every week?
Just like every time with Wicked Crazy Pinfalls, do a good deed, pay it forward. By the way, my son, I love you. Hey, Lily, if you're watching, I love you also.
Hey, add more to it this week. Later, folks.